Добър ден! Здравейте на всички! Радвам се да се видим отново след кратките празници, които имахме. Адина, виждаме ли, че се е включила? Да. Стигнахме до тема 5 на нашия семинар за участието на общностите в процесите на идентифициране, документиране и популяризиране на нематериалното културно наследство. Имам удоволствието да ви представя Адина Чибутариу от Румъния, която всъщност е експерт, фасилитатор от мрежата на ЮНЕСКО. Също така е изследовател в Румънската академия клон ЯШ от 2003 година. Има издадени 4 книги, има редица публикации в международни издания и също така има и опит в воденето на подобни семинари и в Румъния, и в България, отново свързани с конвенцията, нейното прилагане и изобщо за нематериалното културно наследство. Така че надявам се да ви бъде интересно в следващите 2 часа. Тя обещава да бъде по-практично, така че може да имате коментари, въпроси по всяко време. Тя ще се радва да ви отговори. Адина, заповядай.
Thank you, Chayana, for your kind words. Indeed, I have been collaborating with Sophia Center for quite a while, and it was a pleasure every time. I am very fond of Bulgaria because this is the only place where I go to the seaside for the last 15 years. So I hope it will be just as enjoyable for you as it is for me. I have to confess that as a researcher, I'm not a very pleasant person for UNESCO, because they consider that we have the tendency of being too rigid and not to take into account everybody's point of view. We write articles and books on the scientific truth, whereas reality is far more complex. And reality is constructed by the community. And this is where you step in and you have a huge part in building this safeguarding process for the intangible cultural heritage. I will start sharing my PowerPoint now. And I have to mention that I read your answers to the questionnaire on what you think the role of community is in protecting intangible cultural heritage, and you already know quite a lot. You agreed that it's fundamental, it's essential, enormous, important, and so on. That communities play an important role in transmission of ICH and in safeguarding. As we will see in a couple of minutes, there can be no safeguarding, no promotion, no anything without the community. It's just some sterile activity that will have no effects on the social reality. Also documentation and digitizations, you said, and we will see some examples on that. Constant recreation, and this is hugely important because it is the community who validates the fact that an element belongs to intangible cultural heritage. And something that appeared with an exclamation mark was truly important, because you said that we have to work on their awareness as bearers. Indeed, many people come to life in these traditional communities and they take it for granted. They are not fully aware of the value of crafts, let's say, of beliefs and customs. And as experts, we need to validate their cultural heritage. So I structured my presentation today in three parts. First, we will see how we can tell that an element is part of the intangible cultural heritage of the community. Then we will speak about the fact that community has to be involved in documentation for various types of activities. And of course, community plays a very important role in the promotion of intangible cultural heritage. But before going to these specific elements, we have to ask the big question: what is the community and why involve it? It may seem obvious, but experience taught us that some situations may appear, and if we involve the community properly, we may avoid them. For example, sometimes initiatives come from outside, from researchers like me, or from different institutions who want to achieve some political image, let's say. Despite the fact that they may be well-meant, these proposals are one-sided and they cannot cover all the needs of a community that start with economic purposes and go on with visibility, with the right to have a proper image on the outside world and so on. Of course, there can be disputes over the idea of the community. Some may say that, for example, you are not potters, we are potters in a village. And if we ask the persons actually living in that village, we go to the rightful community. Of course, the representation of the community is another aspect to keep in mind. Who gets to speak in the name of everybody else, and also how the community will benefit, because when we go to such a place that maintains customs, we achieve some visibility, but no benefits come back to the people actually living there, and we have to be very attentive to that. Of course, there can be disputes over the consent. Some people may not agree to the exposure they get while being a file nominated on their village. And this is why we need to keep in mind that safeguarding means working with the community. If we take a look in the 2003 convention and also in the operational directives, we get some hints about the purpose of involving the community. In Article 2, we read that people enact and transmit ICH and they identify with it. So they need to recognize it as part of their heritage. Otherwise, it's just something that belongs to the past and has no effect on their lives. They carry with them the knowledge and skills for enacting and transmitting it. So it is the people, the bearers, who are in the position to say, this is my ICH. It is their heritage. They are its stewards, so the intellectual rights over that element belong to the community, not to the researcher or to anybody who is sponsoring, let's say, a project on the element. Any safeguarding will fail without their participation and consent. This is Article 15 from the Convention, and it is highly important because there can be no true help if we don't get their consent on our actions. The role of the states has also been stated, and of course, the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage is just an agreement between states. This means it cannot and will never impose obligations on the communities. We cannot force people from our mostly rural zones to act according to our goals. So we work for the communities, and with the communities, we cannot make them apply for nomination if they don't wish so. The convention and the operational directives request state parties to involve and assist communities with their consent in managing and safeguarding their ICH. So it's a partnership, and we have to let the communities lead the way in our process. Of course, there have been some discussions in the early years of the convention about the fact that we keep saying communities, and sometimes there are not as many people as one may expect to be in order to form a community. And then the UNESCO experts agreed on this formula: communities, groups, or individuals, because it so happens that in some places of the world, only one person remains to carry the craft or the knowledge or even speak a language. And then we need to say that it is about communities, but also about groups or individuals. And I can give you this precise example about Danieli Frim from a village close to Iași, where I live. There used to be 50 potters in the 70s, and only one of them still makes pots there. And for that, we need to pay attention to this village and to include his will, his expectations in our safeguarding plans. So it can happen often to find only one bearer, and for that we need its consent, his consent. How can we identify the communities? Because sometimes they don't want to be identified and exposed to the general public. First of all, they need to recognize one or more ICH elements as part of their heritage. So if they say, this is not familiar to me, this is not what I did back home with my parents or my grandparents, then something was lost on the way, and we need to drop our intentions, obviously. In order to know that it is a community concerned with the element, we have to check if somehow they have already been recognized within the state party as an ethno-linguistic community or minority, we may say, as a religious group, as a local group. So we have to keep in mind that some of these communities are already stated in the administrative image of the zone, of the county. People also may belong to several communities, leave them or join others. For example, somebody may be a crafts person, but also be a Catholic, and we need to respect both of these belongings that the person, the bearer that we have in mind has. People concerned should agree with their identification as a community. So all this public display of their cultural heritage can never be done without a free prior consent. You can see in these images the symbol of partnership. On the upper part of the slide, it's a wooden gate from Romania. It's a peasant that carved this in wood, while as in Sibiu, it's something that speaks more about crafts and industries. in the 19th century. So everything in the UNESCO strategy is done with this full agreement between the parties concerned. The convention and the operational directives give some guidance on how to work with the communities and how to identify them, but they leave much leeway. For example, they say that we need to involve the communities concerned in the management of their ICH. To obtain and document, this means to have letters written by hand in most of the occasions on the free, prior, and informed consent. And also, they leave a lot of blank spaces on how to identify communities and how to involve them, because it's a matter of adaptation. We need to hear them first to see what their needs are, what their concerns are, and then to work together on how we get involved in safeguarding the local ICH. Communities may participate in a lot of activities, and actually it is quite mandatory, because if we file a nomination for the representative list or for the best practices or urgent safeguarding list, if we cannot prove that community was consulted for the inventorying and for identifying and defining the element, and in any other stages of the file, there is no chance that the element can be inscribed. So awareness raising, capacity building, safeguarding, and management of the element in writing nominations, international assistance requests, and periodic reporting, something that has just finished. Everything has to be done together with the communities. Last year, we, both Romania and Bulgaria, had to send to Paris this periodic reporting on how we are working on the safeguarding plan for each element inscribed by our countries. And the community was again at the heart of our activities, because they give a very honest feedback on the activities that institutions and NGOs are performing. Of course, it is always difficult to find a representative that can cover the needs of the whole community. So in order to have an efficient collaboration, we need to find these representatives who are neutral and they can speak their mind in order to achieve the much wanted safeguarding. Sometimes they are not. So we need to work, they are not present in the community. So we need to work with different people who cannot agree among themselves. And this is what the UNESCO does. They bring everybody on the same table to see all the angles of the problem and work on the best strategy to transmit and promote the element of intangible cultural heritage. Of course, they need to have a mandate if they represent the community, and to keep in mind that some members may have different views, and we have to tackle all these different approaches on the problem. Some are more concerned about the economic issue, while others are really paying attention to the fact that only the elders should perform some rituals. So this clash between views is always difficult to handle, and we need representatives to negotiate with the entire community. Community participation can become concrete through workshops, through meetings, consultations, polls. Of course, we need to run surveys between the members of the village and of the group, through media. And the reason why I highlighted this word is easily understandable, because you can see this girl who is not supposed to dress herself as a bear for winter solstice. As you know, this is a male ritual that was performed by young lads before marriage. Well, she's breaking this ritual rule, because today everything is less rigid, but she's also transmitting live on Facebook the custom that she is part of. And through this activity, through media, she is raising awareness of her own kind about the importance of this inherited custom. So things are not just black and white while dealing with the community. Of course, as a researcher, I am annoyed of seeing such young ladies dressed in bear masks. But I have to admit, as a facilitator, that their impact has to be kept in mind. Community participates in capacity building, workshops, in awareness raising activities. They get involved in identifying elements, in safeguarding, and in developing nominations, as I already said. So now that we have spoken about this introductory aspects of dealing with the community, I would love to hear you already, because the idea of a workshop is to have an actual dialogue about the challenges that the communities you worked with have had to be overcome. So I know that Bulgaria inscribed quite a lot of elements, both on the representative list and on the best practices list. And I would like to hear you speaking about how you found the communities, how they identified the element, and how they are working on safeguarding it now. Please don't be shy. I know that some of you are experienced, so maybe we can start a dialogue now. For example, we have this common element, Martenica, which was inscribed in 2017, together with Romania and the Republic of Moldova and Macedonia, Northern Macedonia, I believe. And it is a very generous element, because the custom appears both in villages and in our towns. So who can speak about how Martenica is identified today? How was it in 2023 for you? You have to open your microphones to hear you. It's a pity if you are shy, because, okay, Sylvia, please. Open your microphone, please. I can't hear you.
Да, сега чувате ли ме? Малко е тъмно при мен. Секунда. Ох, и така не става. Включвам се по темата за мартеницата. защото въпросът, който зададохте, беше какво е състоянието на този елемент през 2023. Не знам, превеждат ли ви в момента, дали ме разбирате. Аз работя в музея в Русе. Ние имаме дигитален каталог на мартеницата, който беше създаден миналата година. Защо беше нужно да направим дигитален каталог на мартеницата? Защото се оказа, че българската мартеницата, тя не е българска, мартеницата е много известен елемент, много експлоатиран елемент, но всъщност тя малко присъства в българските музеи, като част от фонда на музея. И това така ни провокира да покажем тези мартеници, които ние имаме в нашия фонд, за да станат те достъпни за широката аудитория. Опитахме се да видим в кои музеи има достъпни онлайн каталози, които представят мартеници, и видяхме, че има само в British Museum български мартеници, т.е. мартеници от България, които са събирани от България. И това още повече ни мотивира да направим каталог. За да го случим този каталог, освен от фонда на музея, събирахме мартеници като дарени. Това наложи да работим изключително тясно с местните общности. Тук много ни помогнаха колегите от читалищата в населените места около Русе. Тъй като музея има установени връзки дългогодишни с много читалища, и те, разбира се, прегърнаха инициативата и не просто ни даряваха мартеници, а разказваха за тях. Какво знаят за традицията, първомартенската традиция, кога и как се правят мартеници, какво са чували от своите прародители. И това беше много важно за нас, защото елементът мартеница е важен, но е важен и разказът за нея. Какво знаят хората, какво помнят хората. Всички тези разкази са достъпни на YouTube канала на музея, като видео, като текст, и те са част от този дигитален каталог, като в този дигитален каталог всеки един експонат, всяка една мартеница е описана с нейните параметри и начинът, по който е постъпила в музея. Това е важно, защото считаме, че по този начин ние правим стъпка към опазване на това нематериално културно наследство и най-вече чрез неговите истории и разказите, които получихме. Това.
Excellent. Thank you, Sylvia. It's fascinating because it's very fresh. To digitize elements is something that everybody wants to do nowadays. It is the next best thing to do with the communities. And I will show you later about global initiative of digitizing. Of course, please give us the link of this digital catalog. We need to have it all and to promote it through our activities. And of course, if it is about Russe...
Да, сега ще го направя. Благодаря. В чата ще го пусна.
Thank you. Please send my regards to Nikolai Nenov from the Russe Museum, one of the facilitators from the network. Martinica is a very special element because it was very adaptive to our modern life. We lost quite a lot of the customs and superstitions that our forefathers had not more than a century ago. but somehow Martinica and Mărțișor in Romanian managed to keep adapting to our needs while staying a spring amulet. So you should know also about the fact that you mentioned British Museum, that I have some pictures from Facebook where local British people from Oxford and some other towns were quite amazed about this red and white thread that appeared in their trees, and they couldn't understand what was going on. They thought it was some Celtic custom about the reg trees, but then somebody came and explained it to them that a very important Bulgarian and Romanian community of students there demands for Martinica and Mărțișoare from home in their packages, and they wear them and then they tie it to the British trees. So this is why it is so important to safeguard these elements, because they represent us in the world even. Yes, Sylvia.
Искам да споделя нещо, сега ме подсетихте, че през 2021 година музея в Русе и музея в Гюргево си обмениха витрини с мартеници. Ние гостувахме в Румъния, за да покажем мартеници от България и да разкажем за тях, а те дойдоха при нас в Русе, за да покажат своите мартеници и да разкажат за тях. Това също беше много важно, защото е едно такова трансгранично сътрудничество по посока на нематериалното културно наследство.
And this kind of cooperation is highly important for UNESCO, because multinational files are the ones that are very welcomed. We have so many cultural common elements, and this speaks about a harmony in our societies, and we should enhance this kind of cooperation. Yes, thank you, Sylvia. If anybody else wants to add something on the idea of working with the community while going into our sections. If not, I will go back to my presentation. And of course, the first step into working with the community is to identify the element of living heritage, because this is the difference between intangible cultural heritage and the good old term of folklore that we learned in our studies and from the books. While folklore is something that stays in the past and sometimes in archives like the one I work with, intangible cultural heritage is about living traditions, and you can see these arrows that go both ways. Communities, groups, and individual concerned need to be in a close relationship with ICH, because they make it, they create it, they practice it, and they transmit it to their children. They own it, something which is very difficult today to prove, and we will speak about misappropriation later. And also they play gender roles, and the identity that they get from this cultural element is the most important thing that we have to keep in mind. So as a member of the community, they feel some continuity with their grandfathers and grandparents in general, and they know who they are, as I mentioned already when speaking about going abroad. Both Bulgaria and Romania have really high numbers of immigrants, so ICH somehow manages to give them support even on a psychological level. Of course, they have to enjoy their own ICH. They build self-respect through these elements. And we get to the most important part. the sustainability of life is built through these customs and crafts that they inherit. We need to provide income to the craftspersons and to respect gender norms and values. So this is the relationship that has to be obvious in our work, in our activities, while trying to safeguard ICH. Community participation in inventorying is really needed, as this quote from Brazil states. If inscription takes place without the dialogue with the community, there can no longer be an efficient safeguarding. It's something performed for the mere report, let's say, of an institution or for some image, but the community has zero benefits from this activity. In the picture, you can see an elderly person, one of the last potters from the northern part of Romania. And of course, any involvement, any activity on the ceramics he is making back home has to be performed with his consent. And we keep this in mind while making different presentations and all kinds of activities that somehow place the researcher on a more visible place. This is an example about how the community was involved in safeguarding traditional knowledge. So it is about area from the Philippines where the elders understood that their knowledge on plants that have the capacity to heal us stopped being transmitted to the younger community members. Of course, the young ones are more into TikTok and Instagram, and we have to think about really good strategies to attract them. And of course, a digital map like the one from RUSE works in these cases. As for the elders in Philippines, they realize they need to connect with the young generation. So it was them who made the first step and reached out to the authorities and asked the young people to come to their villages and to document their knowledge on plants and the therapy that can be conducted this way. Of course, they managed to have some copyright protection, and not only the young ones got really excited about learning these information, but also the materials got to the school curriculum, and many more generations to come will learn about these plants that have a lot of benefits on the human health. So transmission was enhanced with a close collaboration between the elderly and the young generation, with the help of authorities, of course, because in the end, the ones who approve school curricula are the ones who govern us, and these kind of initiatives have to be performed in collaboration with the ones who are able to also finance such workshops. Gender and community involvement is another issue to keep in mind. Of course, we may ask the question, why is a gender-based approach essential when speaking about the convention and safeguarding? We may think that this is something just for the image or for the political correctness of nowadays, But in fact, if we take a look back about the way folklore and ethnography was performed, was done by now, we will discover that it was not quite fair. And I will give you this example of the image from the left side of the screen. I found this picture in the archive I work with, and I could find the name of the potter, but nowhere to be found. It was the name of his wife, who used to paint these plates and all the ceramics he made. So he did them, but the decorations were made by his wife, and nobody wrote anywhere her name. And I gave some phones in the village, and I spoke to her daughter-in-law, and I was able to find his name just to put it in the book. Well, it was UNESCO who drew attention to this patriarchal way of dealing with communities, and quite often we need to pay attention to the gender roles to make sure that women get all the respect they deserve in our safeguarding plans. So this kind of approach puts into context the practices and the activities of gender-defined groups by analyzing the social relationship. As we saw, she was in a full collaboration with her husband who made the ceramics, so it is unfair to leave her out. And then we get to the real image of the community, about the way these dynamics are used to maintain the element. This kind of approach ensures that women and marginalized gender groups are equal spokespersons, because often they don't get to have a voice. So we need to reshape the community in order to let everybody be a part of the cultural heritage. The second step of involving the community is to call members of it into writing nominations and international assistance requests. Of course, Bulgaria and Romania are not eligible for international assistance requests, but it is important to know that in both cases, UNESCO demands for proof that community was involved in identifying the ICH and the projects concerned, in preparing the files, and also that community agreed with the submission of the nomination or the request, because sometimes it is only the authority who needs a project to justify the position, and if the community is not fully into this activity, then the project cannot be approved. So the community commitment has to be an important part of the safeguarding plan, and this is how we should document the file. Of course, everything is done for the communities to benefit, because practicing ICH brings this kind of advantages to them. So safeguarding activities have to assure visibility and profit to the members of the village or of the group, or to the bearer, the one last bearer that still remembers this piece of cultural heritage. Communities' capacities have can manage their ICH properly, and this should be enhanced as the operational directive mentioned. Awareness raising activities. So sometimes they just don't want exposure, and we have to respect that. If they feel that there is no benefit from making to television or to newspapers, then we should refrain ourselves from writing and speaking about that element. Communities should be the primary beneficiaries of any commercial activities. Well, this is the most delicate part of ICH, because some people just smell the economic profit from a label of ICH, and some of the commercial activities never go back to the community, and the bearers cannot benefit from the profit they make. So this is something that we have to guard as facilitators and as experts in the field of intangible cultural heritage. Of course, as I have already mentioned before several times, we cannot apply for any nomination or international assistance without a free, prior, and informed consent of the community. What does this mean? Well, free has to be, refers to the fact that the community agrees with the nomination without any pressure that was exerted on those who are bearers, who still practice a certain craft. Prior means that the information needed for deciding on the file was given before, in advance, to the people. It is a bad strategy and unethical to make them be part of an activity that is already in progress. So before starting a nomination, we have to consult the representatives of the community and to get their consent on even beginning to, that activity. Of course, all relevant information has to be presented, not half-truths on the implications that come from, for example, inscribing an element on the representative list. So we need a balanced judgment in order to let the community decide whether they want or not to be brought in front of the public eye. And this is an example of not to do. It is an actual case that took place in France. And of course, it's about a researcher. I told you, we are the bad kind. A French ethnologist was, let's say, fascinated about a procession that takes place every 6 years in a village from France. And he got to the conclusion that fewer and fewer people are taking part of this procession, and some elements are beginning to be altered, to lose their authenticity, and he stepped in. He thought about listing this element on the representative list, and took the liberty to announce the press that Paris, no specific authority, but Paris had already approved the idea of nominating this procession with a view to safeguard it. He wrote by himself a nomination file. Then on a later stage, he shared the information with the local population, but of course the reaction didn't go in the right direction, because the meetings in the village made people quite angry. They were surprised and suspicious and displeased. They thought that this researcher has an agenda of his own, and they were worried that the rights on this procession, on this custom, would be lost forever to the benefit of other institutions, while as tourists coming to their village will not improve their life that much. As a result, everybody on the village agreed that the nomination process should stop, and the press spoke extensively on this activity that forgot the role of the community. So it's never about the image of a certain person, researcher, or authority. It is about the benefit of the general community or the group who inherited that element and has the duty of transmitting it further. Who are my communities? Of course, because I have already spoken too much, I'm trying to learn from you about your communities, because we all belong to a certain group. 3 years ago, on a conference about the way we teach ICH to our children, we had a distinguished guest from United States of America. Her name is Paddy Bauman, and she spoke about this belonging to a certain practice that we all share. So she starts her courses with questions like: who likes jazz, who drinks coffee, who goes to church on Sunday, and there it is, we have a community. Sylvia, I can see you raised your hand. Is it by mistake, or you want to share about your community? If not, maybe somebody else. For example, I know about Babindan in Bulgaria.
Извинявайте, това е останала ръчичка от предходния ни разговор.
It's okay, but I'm sure you can identify yourself with the community. For example, going to church on Sunday or making red eggs for Easter. Did you inherit that from your grandmother, or is it just part of your work?
Ами на църква не ходя, трябва да кажа, всяка неделя. Но да, като всички колеги, които сме тук, боядисваме ца на Великден. Аз, семейството ми, което е така много интересна, интригуваща емоция. Относно местните общности, трябва да кажа, тъй като аз през последните 3 или 4 години съм доста активно на терен и много често ми се налага да общувам с различни хора по различни проекти на музея. И трябва да кажа, че те са изключително отворени хора и много позитивно и добронамерено гледат към всеки, който се интересува от тяхното наследство. В началото на тази година имах възможност да говоря с хора от едно село на 70 км от Русе. Селото се казва Варненци. Те имат така традицията на черните кукери, т.е. маскират се. Техните младежи се маскират и правят фестивал в селото, който е относително малък фестивал, но се случва през година. И това е устойчива практика. Вече 7-о поколение млади хора съвсем така по свое желание се включват в тази ритуална практика на черните кукери. Черните кукери преди 10 години са кандидатствали с номинация за ЮНЕСКО, но преди 10 години не са били одобрени. Не съм за мотивите за това, че не са били одобрени. Сега отново биха така искали да опитат, но забелязахме, че не са особено решителни заради първия отказ. А приемственост има, защото всяка година, поне по думите на дамата, която организира този фестивал, тя ни обясни, че младежите, които живеят в различни големи градове на България, точно на този ден се връщат, за да могат да направят този фестивал и да се облекат като кукери, което е много ценно, защото те са по-различни, чисто и визуално, и ритуално, като запазени практики. И е хубаво, че все още пазят това, което им е унаследено. С местни общности общувахме съвсем наскоро. Миналата година правихме фестивал на обредния хляб, където трябваше да идентифицираме етнографската група на харцоите. Това не знам как точно ще ви го преведат, но е етнографска група, която живее на определена територия в и около Русе. И те ни показваха установени практики за правене на обреден хляб. Те, разбира се, не са част от елементите на ЮНЕСКО, но пък тук изключително много ценни пак бяха разказите и историите за това как се прави хляба, защо е важно да има определени елементи на този хляб и защо е ценно да знаем и да помним това, което знаем от своите баби. Интересно е да се общува с общности, защото винаги учиш много, виждаш различни неща и се зареждаш с много позитивизъм и енергия. А пък и ако успеем да им повлияем, да имат повече самочувствие и да пожелаят да покажат себе си, това би било още по-добре.
Thank you, Sylvia. It is really interesting to see how these communities are taking care of their heritage. Perhaps your knowledge that you acquire now with these workshops provided by Sophia Center will help you help them. So perhaps they will reach out and the next nomination will be better. The consent of the community is very important. Up until recently, we had formal consents written on the computer and printed. Now UNESCO wants something personal, and the emotional involvement that you mentioned is a great argument while demanding for that element to be inscribed. As for the bread, it is really important because this element brings to my mind the fact that we have to speak about associated ICH practices and all the involved stakeholders. For example, the one who grows the plants, the cereals for the bread to make the flour, the one who actually grounds the grains and so on. Everybody has to be on this table while speaking about an element. This is how UNESCO teaches us to think about the strategy of safeguarding an element, not only the cultural value, but everybody who deals with that custom or that practice up to the form of a bread is entitled of having a voice. Isabella, please. I see a raised hand.
Здравейте. Аз също бих искала да споделя. Това е по-скоро моят личен опит. Моята баба по бащина линия е българка католичка и тя е женена за православен българин. И всъщност най-ранните ми спомени в детството е как аз, примерно, като дете, ние празнувахме 2 пъти Великден, когато не съвпадаха датите, винаги се правеше
Okay, is it all that you want to share, Isabella, because you turned off your microphone?
Извинете, без да си исках да натисна. Всъщност това, което исках да споделя и да кажа, че всъщност това е важно, когато има смесване между различните общности, дори тук на местно ниво, както са българите католици с православни, което се случва 50-те, 60-те години. Всъщност е интересен процес, защото ние не сме отделени от другите и да, общностите си имат определени специфики, но те същевременно се и смесват, има контакт културен и се предават по различен начин. Това е просто като коментар.
Thank you. It's very important because this happens a lot with our migrants too. They live in mostly Catholic host countries, and they have to celebrate the Easter twice. And the effect is that they appreciate it even more when it is not part of the global, of the mainstream custom. So this kind of family practice speaks about the intercultural dialogue that is fostered in these UNESCO strategies. Dimitrina, have you changed your mind?
Не бих желала да споделя. Живея в едно село, което някога е имало население около 4000 души. И прапрадядото на моя съпруг е направил фамилни списъци на хората, които са живеели и обитавали това място. Това, което един вид родословни дървета на тези 50 фамилии, които от 18 век населяват тая територия. Това, което обаче ми направи много силно впечатление, е, че вътре в тези списъци са упоменати единствено и само мъжете. Съпругите са описани, но децата от женски пол, които са родени в тези семейства, за съжаление, не са споменати. В последствие, понеже има такива междуфамилни бракове, част от тези жени и това, което аз имам като лична информация, са се прехвърлили от една фамилия в друга. Се опитвам да възстановя като информация, така че да попълня тая картина и тези 50 фамилии, които са обитавали със своите традиции и обичаи мястото, което също има характерна особеност по повод на споделената информация за хляба. Всяка фамилия е имала изработен дървен печат, който е бил разграфен на 12 зони и който се е поставил върху хляба. Прилича от изображение, нали, което се поставя върху тестото, на рунически знаци. По изключително интересен начин са конструирани и структурирани и формата, по която като размер е бил характерен за всяка фамилия. Аз имам 3 такива печата от различни фамилии от тази общност и за мен беше много интересно да разбера детайли, кой знак какво означава, с какво се отличава, какво символизира и изобщо по повод на замесването на хляба и историята на това. За всеки празник се прави различен тип хляб, който има определени функции и значения, като част от тези хлябове са се пускали в реката, която минава покрай селото, пак с пожелания, заклинания и ред такива. И действително, но претенциите, които аз имам към ситуацията, в която съм попаднала, е да събера тази информация и да я запаза за самата общност като такава. Защото тези 50 фамилии имат наследници и някога тези хора, които сега са 1000 на брой, като останали да живеят постоянно тук, може би някой ще се върне някога някъде и ще потърси нещо за близките си, така че да има нещо, което да има как да споделят. Благодаря.
Thank you so much. You see how unfair it is to only have males mentioned in the history, because the knowledge of making the bread, of making the dough and so on is female. So this is why the elements that are inscribed on the UNESCO lists are more about the making of, the techniques, the know-how, the knowledge around that particular bread or carpet or anything. And this is passed on through women, because we speak about mother tongue, not father tongue. It is the mother who speaks with the children. And she passes on ICH information. And this is what UNESCO is trying to fix now, to give credit to the women as they deserve. Emilia, please. Emilia, you raised your hand.
Да, здравейте. Казвам се Емилия, аз съм секретар в читалището в Куртово Конаре, едно село, което е на 20 км от Пловдив. И така интересното в него е, че тук са отгледани едни от първите така интересни зеленчуци в България. Имаме един от царските дворци, създаден още от цар Фердинанд, след това наследен от неговия син цар Борис, е в селото, в землището на селото. Така че ми е било много интересно, естеството на работата ми е такова, да непрекъснато да общувам в посока опазване на нематериалното културно наследство на общността, да опознавам нашето минало и доколкото е възможно да архивирам и събирам материали. Близостта на царското семейство, те често са гостували тук, особено през пролета, е оказало голямо влияние върху облеклото на местните хора. Това е много интересно. При нас има повече принос на градски фолклор, градско облекло, което не е толкова типично за български села, но ето това оказва влияние. Събирала съм спомени на доста хора през 90-те. Съжалявам, че много хора възрастни си отидоха без да можем да проучим, да научим нещо повече, но доколкото така съм могла, съм събрала някои материали. Правили сме доста проучвания за нематериално културно наследство. Давам такъв пример. Започнахме през 2009 година, правихме една анкета, интервюта с местни хора, куклата в традиционната местна култура. Беше много интересно да разберем нашите предци, баби, майки, с какви кукли са играли на времето. И освен кукли от цветя, от плат, от камък, се оказа, че са правили кукли от царевична шума, което го има и на други места, и при вас има много красиви такива кукли съм виждала. Но това беше нещо, което така ни потикна мен и колегите да направим едно по-така задълбочено проучване и разбрахме, че на времето царевицата е била доста популярна царевичната шума за изработка на сувенири, на постелки, дори на чехли и на кукли. И оттам нашия елемент беше изработка на кукли и сувенири от царевична шума, с което станахме регионален победител. Имаме грамота от Министерство на културата, но не бяхме вписани в ЮНЕСКО. Аз това го казах и миналия път на колегите. Но създадохме една школа към читалището, т.е. възродихме тази, тя имаше няколко човека носиха тази традиция, имах такива умения, възродихме, в момента имаме една доста популярна школа, която е гостувала и в централата на ЮНЕСКО в Париж, на много места в Европа и не само в Европа, и в Азия. След няколко дни, на 11 май, ще има изложба в парламента. Започнахме да експериментираме с царевична шума и икони, и пана, така че това е едно надграждане на това, което се е правило в миналото. И нещо друго, правили сме доста изследвания, само да вмъкна и това, че така, ако мога да кажа, има и общност, правили сме изследване на общност в общността. Какво искам да кажа с това? Това са преселници, хора, които са дошли в края на 19 век в селото, които са носители на друг вид култура, и те са станало едно смесване на традиционните жители с новодошлите. И беше много интересно да научим повече, включително и моята прабаба е от тези преселници, да научим нещо повече за тези хора, за техните песни, обичаи, традиции и дори за приноса им и в кулинарията. Тоест, те са научили пък местните да ползват подправки, зеленини, баници с зеленини и така нататък. Така че има доста изследвания, много интересни неща. Това е един така нещо, което може би няма край. И има винаги нови идеи и възможности за изследване. Това е, което искам да ви кажа.
Thank you, Emilia. Excellent examples, both with the bread, with the inscription, and with the Lutenica from Kurtovo Konare, and all this local image of this village that I was fortunate enough to visit in 2019 and to taste, to actually eat the delicious Lutenica that is made there. This is how we learn.
Вие бяхте в тази група. Вие бяхте в групата, сте били в групата, която ни гостува тогава.
Yes.
Радвам се, че срещам познати.
Thank you.
Да, заповядайте.
Thank you. I'm glad to see you again. I will, with the first occasion. So this is what represents us on in-depth identity, and this makes it even more complicated to work with ICH, because it's a sensitive issue. As long as it represents us and it is part of our personality as a community that we belong to, it is quite risky to impose something from the outer elements, from the stakeholders that are not part of this local image. And what you mentioned, that migrants improved somehow or added to the local identity of Kurtovo Konare is very important for the idea of the community, because we tend to think about the community and the group and the bear as an ideal concept of something where everything is harmonious and coherent, and it has continuity from centuries ago, whereas in reality things are more complicated. We have mixtures of different cultures, of different personalities, and all these have to count in our nomination. So the promotion also has to keep in mind the fact that the community is not that positive image that we see in our books and in our, I don't know, flyers that we attract tourists with. So the operational directives encourage state parties to ensure community participation in raising awareness about their own ICH, but every single time we have to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent. You mentioned something about spells and throwing the bread in the water, perhaps in order to bring in the rain. Sometimes all these costumes and rituals sometimes are a secret that is passed on only through intergenerational contact. And if we expose such spells and enchantments, we may attract some negative reactions from mass media and from the general public. Some may say that it is not legal, that the woman performing healing ritual is not a doctor and she shouldn't be allowed to. And this is why sometimes communities decline our intention of making an element visible and promoting it. Of course, when all things align, if we get to promote the cultural heritage from the village, it can help to ensure that awareness-raising activities do not misrepresent or disadvantage communities or their ICH. So, as the convention from the 2003 states, state parties shall endeavor to ensure that the rights of the communities, groups, and individuals are duly protected when raising awareness about their heritage or engaging in commercial activities. I mentioned that one potter that is left in the village close to Iași. Well, I heard there is another one, and I went to his door together with my colleagues from the county center and from the Romanian Academy, but he refused to open the gate for us and to allow us to take some pictures of the oven that he prepares his ceramics, because he was afraid that someone from the financial authorities will come because of our pictures and our activities and demand some taxes from him. And this will not allow him to have a sufficient income to take care of his family. Well, we couldn't say anything more, and we just left, because it is the free consent of the bearer that it is important in trying to safeguard a craft. Raising awareness is really important in helping the transmission of cultural heritage. And I used here a quotation from an expert in the field that had the power to stress the fact that only if local communities step up and make themselves visible, they can somehow even the situation on the fact that other elements have visibility and get all the benefit. Documentation has the potential to bridge the inequity which the new public domain movement appears to neglect. Indigenous and local communities are not mainstream. So as experts, we have to bring them in front of the public eye, and technology is a part of our strategy. In the picture, you see two craftsmen who live up in the mountains. They make winter coats, colorful ones. And it was a telecommunication company, Vodafone, who imagined this press campaign called Undiscovered Romania, in order to prove they have a good signal. their communication technology is advanced, and we can hear and see even people who are up in the mountains or far, far away. And these old people, husband and wife, got to use the smartphone, and they spoke live with young users of Facebook who asked them questions on their craft. And this is how awareness was raised through modern devices, and came closer to our youngsters who are more used to looking in their devices than connecting with the people around them. It was a very successful strategy, and the fact that the community, the groups, there were several living human treasures who took part in this safeguarding plan. The fact that they agreed to come in these live transmissions made their villages and their local challenges clear to the public eye. So we cannot raise awareness without the participation of the community itself. The intangible cultural heritage, as you can remember, it is defined in the 2003 convention as part of this constant process of recreation by communities and groups in response to the environment. And the environment is changing, so is ICH. We need this strategy of bringing the elders closer to the public eye, because otherwise we may leave the false impression that intangible cultural heritage is about the past. No, we can make our living through crafts and traditional knowledge, and even more so, this care that they took for the environment teaches us that we strayed and we need to go back to a more rational use of the natural resources. So as you can see there, these live transmissions were a hit. A lot of viewers and a lot of like reactions confirmed that ICH is not something that is frozen in time, and it can reach our young generation. Unfortunately, everybody is fond of the UNESCO label, and once an element reaches the inscription, it may become a victim of misappropriation. This means that the intellectual rights on that element are fuzzy. It's hard to say that a certain community only can make some objects and sell them in order to a short transmission, because we have all kinds of commercial agents in the market, usually from China, that are eager to provide cheaper variants of that element of intangible cultural heritage. And here you have two examples from Romania. You can find this Horezu pottery, which should be made only in Vâlcea, in a county from Romania. You can find it in the supermarkets, and it is in a very poor condition. It's easy to see that the technological process is not correct, is not appropriate, but it's cheap, and it uses the image, the colors and the form in order to become visible, whereas the community never receives anything, any percent of the sales. So these situations are frequent after raising a lot of attention on an element. on the right part of the screen, you can see something that is barely traditional. We have recently inscribed on the representative list the traditional blouse. Of course, there are quite a few sites and also of stores from Turkey and India and China that sell the so-called traditional blouse from Romania, but nothing is made by hand, and the industrial chain never reaches any traditional community. So this is another balance that we have to maintain straight in our activities, and sometimes this kind of misappropriation cases explain why some wise people and wise communities refuse to participate in nomination because they would lose the control over the element. And I'm sure that similar situations can be found in Bulgaria too, because it's all about profit. For example, you inscribed a time ago carpet making in Chibutariu, and I'm sure that the market also provides China variants. Can you confirm that this kind of misappropriation situations take place in Bulgaria too? How are you fighting with this challenge of a free economic market? Everything is fair and ethical in Bulgaria. Nobody is trying to steal the cultural image. This is what I get from your lack of response. Okay, Dimitrina, please explain what you showed us before. You showed us something written on a paper.
Това е самата книга, в която са написани фамилиите, а няма родените момичета вътре в тях. Просто исках да покажа образно как изглежда документ. През миналата година, преди около 6-8 месеца, повечето читалища в страната са получили заявление и молба от издателство в Бургас с молбата, ако могат да съдействат за предоставяне на магията на детския фолклор в България. Тоест игри, характерни за регионите, в които хората обитават, от деца. Направих си труда и изпратих такива описания от възрастни хора, които в рамките на 19-20 век са играли в тая общност, какви игри и как са ги изпълнявали. Като изрично, нали, бях описала региона, селото, адреса, цялата необходима информация, нали, необходима като придружаваща, нали, към въпросните игри, които съм описала. От издателството след това получих обаждане, а и от вчера имам имейл, че всъщност книгата ще излезе през месец юни. 112 страници е обема, който са направили, и цената е 20 лева. Това, което мене ме шокира, е, че в писмото се обяснява, че игрите, които са описани от цялата страна на всички читалища и хора, които са се включили, никъде няма описание в съдържанието от кои региони и кой с какво е участвал в създаването на този труд, който практически издателството ще използва за своя полза, а реално хората, които ще го четат и ще го ползват, няма да имат никаква ориентация откъде са и по какъв начин. И изобщо много неприятно се почувствах тая сутрин от въпросната новина. Смятам това за неправилно, но вече нещата са приключили и то постфактум сме уведомени, че такава няма да бъде споделена информация за всички, които са участвали. В случай не съм само аз, нали, която съм си направила труда да изпратя някакъв материал. И вашия коментар просто, ако е удобно.
Yes, it's a case of misappropriation because sometimes communities feel that they are deceived and they are somehow driven to a wrong path. It is our duty to mention their names. They have stewardship on that cultural content. And even you as a collector, as a person who work with the community, and I think this is a case for a trial, because the intellectual property of traditional knowledge is something that should be respected. Sometimes even after inscribing an element, communities are forgotten. Nobody returns to them to keep them in touch with any further activities, and this is the wrong way to conduct activities in the ICH field. So perhaps you shouldn't just accept the situation. It's about misappropriation, unfortunately.
Тиража вече в началото на юни ще е наличен. Аз ще плата тези 20 лева, за да получа екземпляр и да видя кое от това, което съм изпратила, е публикувано вътре, за да мога да предява или изобщо да оповеста в интернет общността, че хората са използвани с некоректна цел.
Yes, this is the only direction of attack for you, the only weapon you have to write a bad review on the book and to draw attention on the lack of ethic principles in publishing such a material. We cannot turn a blind eye to misappropriation because effects are even worse than we can expect. I can tell you that in this village that I showed you from Vâlcea County, where Horezu pottery is made, and it was inscribed early in the 2000. Craftsmen are starting to import their plates and their objects from China and not to work anymore. So this is the impact of the economic challenge. Even the bearers are influenced in their choices about on the facility of importing something that looks like an ICH element. So we need to step up and to let everybody know that things are not going the right way. I see one more hand. Irena? Oh, Dimitrina, hello. Do you want to add something? Sorry. Dimitrina, do you want to add something? No, okay.
Ще се възползвам от съвета ви и бъдете убедена, че ще се постарая максимално да защита интересите на всички, които са се включили в тази инициатива, като са имали доброто намерение и желание тая памет да се съхрани и това да има възможност за по-широк достъп. Но факта, че сме уведомени, че няма да бъде споменато нищо за регион, от който то произлиза, е просто възмутителен.
Good luck. And please, if you don't mind, keep me posted on this issue. Mirena.
So hello. I am speaking from the point of view of a scientist from Bulgarian Academy of Science, plus person who is dealing with digitalization, and person who, besides cultural and digital background, has a bit of a business background. And I can say that misinterpretation and misuse happens everywhere, unfortunately. So I urge the colleagues to not, because of 1-2 cases, stop wanting to promote or digitalize their content because of one only misuse. I understand the implications, I understand what it can bring, but maybe we can learn to search out rights through court or other sources instead of fearing to show the heritage. I can give an example with Martinica. A colleague here said it's Pavlina, I think, Pavlina Damjanova, if I'm not wrong, from Etara. She wrote that it is full in our Bulgarian market with fake Martinicas coming from China, made in China, and they sell well in Bulgaria, besides the traditional ones. And yes, some may say that our culture is changed by them, but actually the truth is that when culture becomes popular, of course, there is somebody who will try to benefit in a trade way, but if we don't promote it at all, if we don't try to make it live at all, then we will lose it. Isn't it so? So can we accept 1-2 trials of others to misuse and somehow try to control them in the bigger benefit of making the culture continue? If I am understood right.
Yes,
I can give a similar example with weaving, by the way, in Bulgaria, weaving traditions. In latest years, there are some festivals and trade activities, including such sites which you showed, with different symbols for weaving. And now it has become a bit unclear what is really traditional and what is really twisted to be something to sell. And it's our work actually to, I believe all of us, communities plus researchers, to mark it somehow, which is only trade and which is really traditional and should give benefit to the community. But we shouldn't fear promoting it, because since this promotion has started, I can see in Bulgaria many more people interested in this culture, wearing such t-shirts or such shirts. There are many festivals. Some can argue about those festivals, how much really traditional they are, but actually the truth is they do promote the culture. That was my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirena. A very insightful contribution to our discussion. Indeed, we cannot fear over commercialization so much and not to promote anymore. But of course, we need the help of more clear laws on ownership and to speak our mind when it comes to misappropriation. The experts should say to the potters that it is not okay to stop making ceramics and to import it from China.
True.
This is the way we can control somehow the market by advising. This is while all the experts can do, advising the craftspersons to keep their mind on what their grandfather taught them. So indeed, festivals are another issue for the UNESCO strategy. Festivalization, it is called, and you can hear the negative implication of that. But sometimes it has a more positive effect on the community. It brings them together. Somebody else mentioned earlier that people are coming to that village specifically for that time of the year, just to reconnect with the community, just to reconfirm their belonging to that traditional community. And as long as authorities don't get carried away with compromises, festivals play an important role in the safeguarding plan too. Yes.
Maybe I can add a bit that there is some policies involved indeed in the safeguarding that to promote the specific tradition, not, as you said, the misuse of it? Thank you.
Another key point in the safeguarding plan is the fact that we need education for the general public, and when you select specific crafts people, for example, to come in a fair, you implicitly make education for the visitors at the fair. So if they find something brought from China, they will buy it because it's more colorful and it's cheaper. But if you don't allow such products to be exposed to the general public, there you have subconscious education that you conduct only by selective choice of the participants. Yes. Emilia, you raised your hand.
Само така искам да обсъдим с вас. Преди, през 2013 година бяхме поканени от една фондация Духовно огледало, която работи с талантливи школи от страната. И всъщност ние тази школа, за която споменах, за кукли и сувенири от царевична шума, тя бе спечелила през 2012 година един конкурс в България, чудесата на България, в област нематериално културно наследство. И тая фондация, която ни покани да поиска да работи с нас, тя в същото време покани чипровци и тяхната школа. И заедно така двете места, също и някои така добри школи от страната, се включихме в тази фондация и благодарение на нея имаме доста всички тези изяви и пътувания в страната, в чужбина, цялата реклама, която се прави, става чрез тази фондация. Това доведе до по-голяма популяризация и до привличане на повече участници в тази дейност. Това според вас добре ли е? Ние бяхме длъжни в случая да се преименуваме от школа за сувенири, кукли и сувенири от царевична шума в школа Духовно огледало, като част партньор на тази фондация, която се казва Духовно огледало и работи с таланти от България. Другото, което вие споменахте пак за тази школа, искам да кажа, че сега има една заплаха, според мен. Не знам дали е заплаха, как да го изтълкуваме. В общината се прави къща на занаятите, като целта е този наш занаят да се, всъщност, деца от цялата община да работят, да изработят сувенири от царевична шума. Така че при нас ще има школа, продължаваме традицията, работим с поколенията, но ще има и в общината. И сега не знам как да го приема това като заплаха или като нещо добро, популяризация. Що се отнася до фестивалите, за които споменахте преди малко, ние правим два фестивала при нас. Куртово Конари фест, който има и друго име, фестивал на чушката, домата, традиционните храни и занаяти. От 3 години вече правим един фестивал Плетеница, който е за занаяти от растителни материали. За първия фестивал, който е за чушката, домата, лютеницата, напоследък той беше първия фестивал читалищен в страната, посветен на храни. Беше малко нетрадиционно, когато го започнахме през 2009 година, но в момента има доста такива фестивали, доста подобни. Даже на едно място има фестивал, който носи същото име, фестивал на чушката, домата, традиционните храни и занаяти. Много често копират почти същата програма, с малки изключения, копират самия формат, статут, регламент. И много хора ми се обаждах в началото, но аз просто Това не го смятам за голямо предизвикателство, защото ние си имаме нашата публика, нашите фенове и както вие споменахте, един такъв фестивал води до оживяване на мястото, до икономическо развитие, до връщане на хора, които не живеят в селото към мястото, до емоционална свързаност, до гордост от това, което се случва и много други ефекти. Това е, което искам да ви кажа.
Thank you. I think you answered yourself already, because you said that you have your own public and you have your own target, and your trademark is already known in the area, and you should continue and lead the way for the copycats that you have around. This is the price of success, like those fake objects from China. As for traveling around and advertising your traditional objects, I see no side effects. So it's good when a foundation, an NGO, provides the money to draw attention and tourists to the traditional community. And we spoke about a patriarchal society, and finally a man speaks. Let me hear you, Marius. Can you unmute yourself, Marius? You raised your hand. I'm not sure if he's only typing. Can you help me with this? Or perhaps you want to be heard.
Adina, he hasn't got a mic, so he won't ask.
Okay, but you also
Yes.
raised your hand, Chayana, earlier. And
Yes, because I saw a lady in the attendees list. She raised the hand, but maybe you cannot see her, Lydia Yotova.
Okay,
Yes,
let us hear Lydia.
Mhm.
Please, Lydia.
Maybe again some troubles with the mic.
Could you translate what was written on the chat, please, Chayana? If I have some answers to give back. It is somehow ironic that as a representative of the male point of view, Marius cannot be heard. I wish I could have a
Здравейте,
dialogue.
чувате ли ме?
Hello, Lilia.
Да, чуваме.
Имах проблем с интернета. Казвам се Лилия Йотова и съм фотограф. Председател съм на Асоциацията на професионалните фотографии и отделно от това се занимавам и с интелектуална собственост. Правя докторантура в областта на интелектуалната собственост в творчески индустрии и това ме провокира да взема участие в това събитие. Исках да споделя с вас няколко неща. Първо, считам, че фотографията и документирането, опазването на нематериалното културно наследство е много близко. Фотографията би могла да бъде много полезна. Ние с колегите фотографии сме свидетели, документираме, опазваме това наследство, може би 15-20 години, всички колеги, които са член на нашата организация, ми прави впечатление това, че всъщност много рядко се обръщат към нас от музеи, институции, от такива кадри. Ние наистина имаме такива в огромни количества, още повече, че сме много хора и успяваме да се печатаме и фестивали, събития и традиции, които се провеждат ежегодно. Аз вчера се връщам на април от Копривщица. Имаме поглед върху доста традиции, обичаи, които може би не са забелязани, не са включени в списъците на ЮНЕСКО. Всяка година снимаме кукери в различните региони на България, снимаме нестинари, сватбите в Рибново, чипровските килими, месения на хляб, коледари, лазарки и много други такива. И бихме могли да си бъдем много полезни в тази област, когато имате нужда от ето сега по време на дигитализацията, бихме могли да сме ви полезни. Това е първото нещо, което исках да споделя. И второто нещо е относно интелектуалната собственост. Смея да твърда, че тук в България, а може би и не само тук, е много ниска правната култура на всичките страни, и на ползватели, и на общностите, и на организациите. Просто хората не знаят правото на кого принадлежи и какво да направят така, че да не го нарушават. Ние, когато снимаме обекти на културно наследство, също се сблъскваме с най-различни казуси, но за да не ви претоварвам с информация, просто исках да споделя това с вас. Благодаря ви.
Thank you. Indeed, photographs are highly important in our efforts in reaching out, raising awareness, and even the names of the people who took the photographs are under concern because quite often these images are stolen and used by different sites, and the name of the photographer is forgotten. So it is a general issue of misappropriation, and this idea that you mentioned about photographs leads us to this campaign, Wiki Loves Folklore. We all know Wikipedia. This year, because we all celebrate 20 years since the release of the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, Wikipedia is welcoming pictures, as you mentioned, on elements of intangible cultural heritage. So we already had some online meetings on this initiative. It is a global network of experts in the field that are coming together in order to let the communities and individuals know that they can make their own contributions to the promotion of local elements of intangible cultural heritage. So type on the internet Wiki Loves Living Heritage, Wiki Loves Folklore 2023. You have to make an account, and then you can upload your pictures of your communities that you mentioned, and even with the bread and the lutenica and the carpets and everything that defines you on a spiritual level. And this large audience that Wikipedia has can help you gain attention and benefit from this awareness that the general public has on your local elements. So we can now draw our conclusions. We saw that the role of communities in safeguarding is constant, They get engaged in transmission and enactment of ICH, because if nobody practices, then it's not living heritage. But also they have to identify it, to inventory it with the experts, to document it, to research it. It's fascinating how our children, once put in contact with elements of traditional knowledge, they improve their relationship with the family. They have a better intergenerational dialogue, because they go home from school and they learn more from their parents, and they get to see them with different eyes. I didn't know, grandmother, that you know so many things about this homework of mine. So it is important to have an education level on our approach, and this is how we can revitalize it. Communities ensure access to places and materials. They transmit information, and the other agencies are asked by communities to step in and to help. This is the secondary role that we have to accept as experts when dealing with safeguarding. So the key questions that we have to answer while being on field work and working with ICH are the things to take away from our delightful meeting from today. Who is the community concerned? Is it real, or is it something artificial, like something they try to build in order to define their personalities? For example, I know from my work with communities abroad that the third generation of migrants are trying to somehow reconnect through an effort with their roots. It's no longer a community, but it's a psychological need. And then something that they take from an archive and they put on the scene cannot be, like a dance, for example, cannot be considered an element of living heritage. The second question is who represents them and with what mandate, because some people may come and say, I am the person to talk to from this village, but we have to verify this. How can we inform the community in a proper way and to involve them? How can safeguarding measures and other actions be developed with the involvement and consent of the community? And who may and should be involved in the implementation and monitoring of safeguarding and other actions? We have to keep in mind that all segments of the populations have to have an equal role. Women, old people, young people. It's a poor thing to write a nomination without consulting everybody from the village, even though some may be more proeminent in the community. It is our duty as facilitators, as experts, to let everybody be heard, because ICH belongs to everybody. So this is why it's so delicate to work with two. Paddy Bauman, the professor from United States I mentioned earlier, said that ICH is like the water from a water tank. We are the fish, and we are breathing and eating ICH. It's everywhere around us, and sometimes we are not fully aware of it, and this is where challenges start to appear. So if you have any more questions on the involvement of community, I am eager to hear them. And just to help you a little bit more, I will show you your answers that you gave before our meeting on the question, what rights and responsibilities do you think communities have in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage? After hearing this presentation and your colleagues speak about their experience, do you still think that communities shouldn't change content or safeguard authenticity more? Or do you accept the idea that ICH is constantly evolving, it's as dynamic as the language? So take a look at your answers, and if you have different thoughts or you need to confirm that you were right right from the beginning, I am happy to hear you. I think we should lose this myth of authenticity when speaking about ICH. It's something that we inherit from folklore and the old school of ethnology, where scientists were somehow obsessed with the pure form of a ritual, of a belief. Societies are never pure, and therefore their customs are not either. We shouldn't judge. We shouldn't act as prosecutors. As long as the community recognizes the element as part of their legacy, we can only try to help them transmit. So no conclusions? If not, I will stop here, and I will thank you for this great discussion. I can feel your passion through the screen, and this makes me feel fortunate that I was together with you. Thank you.